It's the last edition of the week, so grab a cup of coffee or your favorite beverage as we take you around the world for 55 minutes of international news and analysis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak apologises for leaving D-Day events early, noting it was a mistake not to stay in France longer. European Union election begins with Dutch exit poll suggesting tight race between far-right and centre-left parties. 11 people hospitalized due to extreme heat in Arizona. The World Today starts now. The deadline for registration is over and candidates standing in the UK's general elections are now known. Party leaders are back from Normandy in France, where they spent Thursday commemorating the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. It's all hands on deck as candidates continue their campaigns for the upcoming July 4 polls. We can tell you Conservatives Prime Minister Rishi Sunak held a campaign in southwest England, while Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer took his to London. Representatives from the 7 biggest political parties in Great Britain are also expected to go head-to-head in a debate in a couple of hours from now. And as we mentioned earlier, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was among other political and world leaders in Normandy, France this Thursday, commemorating the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Now, unlike others, Mr. Sunak appeared to have just breezed in and breezed out of the event. Reports circulated on Thursday night that he'd left early from Normandy, and it later transpired he'd taken part in an interview about the elections. This move had since sparked many criticism, forcing the Prime Minister to tender an apology. The context of the apology, which was posted on social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, reads, "The 80th anniversary of D-Day has been a profound moment to honor the brave men and women who put their lives on the line to protect our values, our freedom, and our democracy. This anniversary should be about those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. The last thing I want is for the commemorations to be overshadowed by politics. I care deeply about veterans and have been honored to represent the UK at a number of events in Portsmouth and France over the past 2 days and to meet those who fought so bravely. After the conclusion of the British event in Normandy, I returned back to the UK. On reflection, it was a mistake not to stay in France longer, and I apologize." Let's bring in political analyst Nathaniel Oguni, who joins us from London. Nathaniel, great to see you. And in just a couple of hours from now, 7 biggest political parties in Great Britain will go head-to-head in a debate. What should Britons expect from the debate?
Good afternoon. So it's a 7-party debate, which is incredible. Earlier this week, we had just the leaders of the 2 main parties. So we had Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer doing a head-to-head. In this case, now we have 7 parties taking place. That includes, of course, the main 2 parties, the Conservatives and Labour, but neither of them are sending their leaders. So instead, Rishi Sunak is sending Penny Mordaunt, who is a cabinet minister. She's the leader of the House of Commons, so she's responsible for government business in Parliament. But the Labour Party are sending Angela Rayner, who's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and has actually had some falling out with Keir Starmer. But they're sending sort of deputies instead of attending themselves. And then you have the other parties. So we have Reform, we have the Liberal Democrats, we have the Scottish Nationalists, the Welsh Nationalists, and we have the Green Party taking place as well.
And in the last debate, Nathaniel, Mr. Sunak claimed that Labour would hike taxes up by £2,000 per working household. The statistics watchdog has criticized Sunak's presentation of the figure. Do you think it's a strategic move to mislead voters?
So I think the Prime Minister will continue to use the £2,000 figure, saying that Labour will raise taxes by that figure per household. You may remember that in 2016, during the EU referendum, the Leave campaign, which ultimately was successful, talked a lot about £350 million in terms of how much the UK pays as its membership of the EU. Similarly, the £350 million figure was repeated a lot. And even though the opposition at that time, the Remain campaign, complained about the use of the figure, their complaints served to amplify. And so them complaining about the figure actually helped. In the same way, the Labour Party complaining about this £2,000 figure just means that more people are likely to hear about it. The £2,000 figure comes from some official Treasury costings and then Conservative Party analysis based on those figures. Labour have not ruled out tax rises in a number of areas, capital gains being one. And so I think it's fair for the Conservatives to place questions over Labour's policies for tax. If they haven't ruled out tax rises, then I think it's fair to suggest that there might be some coming.
And I think that the Prime Minister has been really busy in the last few days, packing 2-3 events in the same day, which is probably what he did yesterday in Normandy, when he should have stayed fully for the event, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime commemoration, 80th anniversary. Most of those veterans, most of them may not be around for the next celebration of D-Day. Many have criticized him, saying it was disrespectful of him leaving the events to go do a political interview back home in Britain. But was it disrespectful when you really look at it, what it is that he did? Do you think that he was really dissing, to use a more familiar word for many on the streets? Do you think he was really dissing all the other world leaders? Because it was a really significant event on Thursday.
Yes, D-Day commemorations are a significant event. And so I think it was right that the Prime Minister apologised for missing the end of the celebration. I think it's right they apologised for not staying for the entire duration. The Prime Minister has sort of gone online and apologised for that. I think it's also important that we remember what else the Conservatives have done for veterans. So particularly when it comes to veterans, the Veterans Minister, a man called Johnny Mercer, recently announced about £70 million of support for British veterans. So that was in terms of their health and mental health, and that was in terms of skills, making sure that they can get good jobs once they finish university. That includes money for tax cuts for employers who employ veterans and things like that. So the Conservative Party have done a good amount of things for veterans, but I think the Prime Minister was probably right to apologise for leaving the celebrations early.
And I suppose the comments of Labour leader Keir Starmer and Scottish First Minister John Sweeney came before Mr. Sunak's apology, because he did take responsibility eventually. Keir Starmer said that the Prime Minister will have to answer for his own actions. Sweeney said it was breathtakingly terrible. How do you think that these candidates or other political candidates can leverage on this ahead of the election?
So the Prime Minister has even taken some friendly fire on the matter. There's even been some members of the Conservative Party who have come out and said that they were disappointed that he left. He left at the time he did. So yeah, as I say, it's good. It's good that he apologised. It's an unfortunate step. It's one that undoubtedly will be brought up at tonight's 7-way debate. And indeed, there are a few more debates to go, including another head-to-head between Sunak and Starmer. So it's probably likely to be brought up there as well.
Right. And as we end this conversation with you, Nathaniel, looking forward to July 4, how do you think the Prime Minister is really feeling? Probably overconfident, I would say.
Well, I suppose you'd have to ask the Prime Minister for that. I think this is probably the missing of the end of the D-Day commemorations is probably unfortunate. It's right that he apologised for that. It's not exactly how you would want your campaign weekend to start. But nonetheless, I think we do have a few things to look forward to. So the parties are expected to bring out their manifestos next week, and their manifestos will set out their programmes for government. Indeed, we've had some big announcements from the Conservative Party already, whether that's around national service or bringing down energy bills. So that gives us a taste of what is expected to come. Equally, from the Labour Party, they have talked a lot about votes at 16, but the questions about their tax policy are probably likely to dominate not just tonight's debate, but more broadly.
Nathaniel, it's been great speaking with you. Thank you for joining us on The World Today.
See you soon.
To another election in Europe, but of the continental nature. European parliamentary elections have kicked off in the Netherlands, with an exit poll suggesting that Geert Wilders' far-right party made big gains in Thursday's polls. Although exit polls suggest the far-right party was in a tight race with the Green Labour alliance, which is set to take more seats in the European Parliament, Mr. Wilders' party is on course for big gains in many of the EU's 27 member states. The European Union elections, which run for 4 days, is expected to end on Sunday, marking the 10th national election since 1979 and the first post-Brexit election.
Asylum policy, you also have the influence of the European Union with all the guidelines that we are bound on. And if you want to change that, you also need to have a strong presence in the European Parliament and make sure that if necessary, we will be able to change the European guidelines in order to be in charge of our own immigration policy and asylum policy. A lot of things we can do now, but other things we are depending on European regulation. It is important. It's one of the major issues in the Dutch politics today. What direction will we go when it comes to our border and immigration and asylum policy, and it's now a very close call between the Social Democrats and the Greens, who are combining forces, and my own Party for Freedom, that who will be and will be at the end of the day the largest party. And this is very important as a message to the European Union, and also for the achieving and making a larger group in the European Parliament that gives us power to change all those European regulations in order to be more in charge of it ourselves here in the national parliaments.
Over in the United States, 11 people have landed in hospital as thousands waited in scorching heat to enter a Trump campaign rally in Phoenix, Arizona. The temperature was 44 degrees Celsius as former President Donald Trump took to the stage in a mega church in the city. An excessive heat warning is still in place today, with authorities asking residents to limit the time spent outdoors and stay hydrated. The National Weather Service forecasts record-breaking temperatures in interior California and parts of Nevada and Arizona. The intense heat has placed more than 30 million people across the Southwest region under alerts for dangerously hot temperatures, with officials asking residents to take precautions. Well, the heat did not stop the former president giving his campaign speech at the rally in Phoenix. President Donald Trump vowed to overturn incumbent President Joe Biden's recent border policies, promising to seal the U.S.-Mexico border and begin the largest domestic deportation in history. It's the former president's first rally since his criminal conviction in a New York hush money case, which found him guilty of falsifying business records in relation to a payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. His next campaign is set for Sunday in Las Vegas, which is also recording unusually hot weather.
Everything is fake. So they come up with this order. I won't say it because I don't like using the word bullshit in front of these beautiful children. So I won't say it. I will not say it. But this thing allows millions of people. This allows millions of people into our country. Joe Biden's order is pro-invasion, pro-child trafficking, pro-women trafficking, pro-human trafficking, pro-drug dealers. And in all, it's really, they bring death and they bring destruction into our country. It's really pro-illegal immigration. It's great for illegal immigration. On day one, I will seal the border, I will stop the invasion, and we will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. Have no choice. We have no choice. Biden has given us no choice. We've never had massive amounts of drugs pouring into our country. We fought it like hell. We were fighting. And by the way, you'll never solve the problem without the death penalty.
5 countries have been elected non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council during the 78th session of the UNGA in New York. Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama, and Somalia are expected to replace Ecuador, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, and Switzerland, whose terms end on December 31st. The 5 countries which obtained the largest number of votes will begin a 2-year term from January 1st, 2025.
Number of ballot papers, 190. Number of invalid ballots, 0. Number of valid ballot papers, 190. Abstentions, 5. Number of members present and voting, 185. Required 2/3 majority, 124. Number of votes obtained. Pakistan, 182 votes. Somalia, 179 votes. Latin American and Caribbean states, 1 seat. Number of ballot papers, 190. Number of invalid ballots, 0. Number of valid ballots, 190. Abstentions, 6. Number of members present and voting, 184. Required 2/3 majority, 123. Votes obtained. Panama, 183 votes. Argentina, 1. Group C, Western European and other states, 2 seats. Number of ballot papers, 190. Number of invalid ballots, 0. Number of valid ballots, 190. Abstentions, 2. Number of members present and voting, 188. Required 2/3 majority, 126. Number of votes obtained. Denmark, 184.
To a tragic incident in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a fire at a displacement camp in the eastern part of the country destroyed approximately 50 makeshift tents, leaving dozens of families without shelter. No casualty has been recorded. The fire is believed to have started during cooking at the Mukanga Displaced Peoples Camp near the provincial capital Goma. The camp has already experienced bomb attacks in early May, which killed at least 18 people and injured 32 others. Many of the victims were women and children. Welcome back. The Coast Guards of the United States, Japan, and South Korea have held their first 3-way exercise in the Sea of Japan. The joint drill, which was open to the media, took place about 40 kilometers off the coast of Maizuru in the Japanese city of Kyoto. The joint exercises followed an agreement by the leaders of the 3 nations last August to strengthen security cooperation. The Coast Guards of the 3 countries also signed a memorandum of understanding last month to enhance maritime cooperation. According to media reports, the drills were a response to concerns about the growing influence and activities of China amid territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Beijing has stated it will defend its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and has accused countries like the United States of interfering in its internal affairs. Meanwhile, happening in Europe, the central bank cut key interest rates on Thursday, offering a glimmer of hope for the continent's struggling economies and for the global fight against inflation. For more on this, let's bring in the DW's correspondent, Stephen Beardsley, who is in Berlin. Stephen, great to see you. Why is this rate cut so important?
Yeah, obviously the fight against inflation right now is pretty much a global fight. It's happening everywhere. And on the face of it, what the ECB did yesterday that may not seem like such a big deal. 25 basis points, quarter of a percentage point. It's not even the first major central bank to do this, getting beat by Canada a few days ago. However, what's interesting is it does this before the US is doing it. They're, of course, talking about cutting rates later this fall. And if you look back a year and a half ago, the tables were completely turned. The US was having a much better time fighting inflation. Prices seemed to be going down at a much more regular clip, whereas the EU was still struggling with high prices because of the aftermath of the start of the war in Ukraine. Energy prices, of course, spiking there. In the meantime, we've seen that the US economy has done very well, while the European economies have struggled and will likely continue to struggle for a while. That being said, inflation has proven sticky in the US, as they say, probably because of that positive economic output there. That's one reason behind it. And you have to give credit to the ECB president, Christine Lagarde, for walking this tightrope between cooling inflation on the one hand by raising interest rates, and on the other, keeping borrowing rates decent enough for the different countries in the Eurozone. Not all of them can borrow at the same rates. Now, ultimately, this is also positive for businesses. If borrowing costs go down, that could be good for the continent. And this is a general positive sign that could also influence households about the rate of inflation and the course of things, where things are going.
But Europe has been struggling since the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. How are things looking now?
In some ways, they are looking better. If you look, for example, at energy prices, which I mentioned, they've come down seriously over the past 2 years, so they're not such a problem anymore. That is a real positive, and that helps households and businesses. If you look at tourism right now, it's at its peak in the summer. The peak is coming, I should say. That's really positive for southern European countries in particular. Spain, Italy, Greece. They really are dependent on those tourism revenues. We also have the Olympics coming up in Paris. That's another positive. But overall, you do have a lot of factors that really cloud that outlook. And first and foremost is the war, because no one knows what direction that's going to take. That puts a lot of financial pressure on the economies here who are continuing to supply and work with Ukraine. They will be in charge probably of rebuilding a lot of the costs for rebuilding Ukraine. It's also politically, it's a massive thing. No one really knows where it's going. On top of that, you still have interest rates that are still quite high. Even if they've been lowered for the first time, they are quite high. That is a huge burden on businesses. And then you have general questions about the competitiveness of Europe compared to the US or China. Germany, for example, has been struggling. Its growth rate has been especially low, and that's been the traditional engine for Europe. So that is problematic. On top of this, you have some bigger structural questions. You have a lot of climate-related expenses that are coming up for the EU. And then you have the big demographics question. As birth rates fall here, people are having fewer children. So where are the kindergarten teachers going to come from? Where are the daycare workers going to come from? That's a big question as well. And both of those things are going to add to that inflationary pressure over the long term.
Can imagine. Stephen, populist parties are expected to gain in the European Parliament elections this weekend. What could that mean for a continent still struggling economically?
Yeah, we should mention that it's expected that mainstream parties will hold on to the majorities. But of course, a good showing by populist parties would send a very strong signal. It would also affect, in the end, the business that goes on in the parliament and the focus areas. And what we would expect is that the focus may turn away somewhat from environmental issues and more towards immigration issues, which are really the bread and butter of a lot of these parties, as immigration has become so noticeable, has grown in many ways across these countries in recent years. Communities feel overwhelmed in a lot of ways. And then you have the war on top of that weighing down on a lot of people. So that's where populist parties are really gaining. That being said, you do have to notice that populist parties struggle to talk about economics in the way that they used to. For example, an exit from the EU for many countries is not as attractive as it was after we've seen what happened with Brexit. The UK has struggled economically. Trade has not hit the same levels, and that's going to continue to be a problem. We also know that lowering energy costs, for example, by a return to Russian gas, cheap Russian gas, that's not really on the table anymore given the way the war has gone. On this issue of immigration, that is really the key economic issue, but even that plays into some longer-term challenges and not in a positive way. If you reduce immigration from third-party countries outside the EU, then where are you going to get future hospital workers? Where are you going to get those future daycare workers that we talked about? Because they're not coming organically from the EU right now. And that's a trend that we see across the bloc. So that's an issue that populist parties are ultimately going to have to address as well. And they haven't really come up with very convincing answers so far.
Well, thanks again, Stephen, for bringing us up to speed on this. Here in Nigeria, the country's Data Protection Commission is urging data protection compliance organizations to follow new regulations or risk losing their licenses. At a meeting in Lagos, Dr. Vincent Olatunji, the National Commissioner, stressed the need for DCPOS to improve their performance and register more data processors.
It's a meeting between the Nigeria Data Protection Commission and Data Protection Compliance Organizations, DPCOs, to discuss the issuance of new regulations and essential compliance services. Under the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, a DPCO is any entity duly licensed for the purpose of training, auditing, consulting, and rendering services and products for the purpose of compliance with the regulation or any foreign data protection law having effect in Nigeria. In 2023, the Nigeria Data Protection Commission was established under the Nigeria Data Protection Act as the independent data protection authority overseeing all matters relating to personal data protection in Nigeria. Hence this collaborative session to discuss the critical role of DPCOs as key stakeholders in the ecosystem. According to the National Commissioner and CEO of the NDPC, Dr. Vincent Olatunji, 19 licenses of underperforming DPCOs were revoked in 2023, and the Commission plans to take similar actions this year.
We revoked 19 licenses based on the evaluation of what they did, what they submitted to us. We are going to do the same thing this year. So, DPCOs that are not really working, we may have to revoke some licenses. So all of us should buckle up and work, contribute to what we are trying to build. We opened the portal for registration of data controllers and processors, which is the first thing in implementing the law. Between when we opened and now, more than 3 months, we've not done up to 500 registration, even not up to 400. Yet, we have over 500,000 data controllers and data processors of major importance in Nigeria. We've done a bit by creating awareness, put it out there that you register, but the work lies with you guys.
The establishment of a national certification to allow certified DPCOs in Nigeria to operate anywhere outside the country was also announced by the National Commissioner.
Let's have a national certification process, but in terms of standard, in terms of the curriculum, in terms of framework, in terms of delivery, it should be perfect or even better than what we have in any part of the world. And that is why in making that happen, we just licensed the Institute of Information Management as the national certification body. So we are trying our best to ensure that we put in place mechanisms to stimulate growth in this ecosystem, to give you recognition within Nigeria and outside, and to create massive job opportunities for you.
DPCOs play a crucial role in ensuring compliance with data protection laws. They are at the forefront, guiding businesses and institutions through the maze of regulations to protect personal data effectively. But what are some of the challenges they face?
This is an emerging industry, and when we talk about the level of awareness, I think a lot still needs to be done. So part of the challenges being faced by the DPCOs has to do with the lack of adequate awareness. A good number of the stakeholders within the ecosystem are even yet to understand what the law is saying and the roles and responsibilities they are supposed to play. Primarily, the custodian is the NDPC, and in the last couple of years, NDPC has actually been doing a lot in the area of awareness creation.
We consider that this entire data protection initiative, the law and all that, are yet new. and then the ecosystem is simply waking up. More organizations are realizing the need to ensure that they can have trust with their customers, their clients, both within the country and outside. So it's just something that we are just getting into.
As the NDPC rolls out new data protection regulations, both the Commission and DPCOs will need to work hand in hand to achieve their shared goal of enhancing data protection standards across Nigeria.
Staying in the country, the Minister of State for Health has commissioned the newly built Center for Human Virology and Genomics laboratory at the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research in Lagos. During his one-day visit to the institute, Dr. Tunji Alausa also inspected the research committee secretariat and commissioned several test kits manufactured at the center. Our correspondent, Mary Alala Yusuf, reports.
The community at the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research has been anticipating this visit from the Minister of State for Health. The DG of NIMA, Professor Babatunde Salako, gives a nostalgic welcome address as he intimates the audience that his time in the institute is coming to a close.
Within the past decade, NIMA has received external grants from several organizations, including the WHO, TDR, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the National Institute of Health in the US, the US CDC, and the CDC Foundation. It is with nostalgia that I receive you today for the commissioning of our Center for Human Virology and Genomics, because it may be one of the very few last public functions that I may be performing as the Director General of this great institution.
In his reply, the Minister of State for Health commends NIMA for the strides it has made.
Let me thank all the researchers that have contributed to this and the other things you're working on. Please use this hepatitis B quantitative PCR kit as a guinea pig or surrogate to how you're going to now develop an aggressive commercialization plan.
One may be tempted to label him with the phrase "man of action" as he gives practical instructions to overcome the hurdles the research center faces and move it forward.
You said you're having bottleneck with NAFDAC in approval. Professor Marco, could you please send a memo to me on this? And I promise you that if I get that memo within 90 days, if you meet all the regulatory requirements, you will get your NAFDAC approval within 90 days.
With that, he launches the tuberculosis test kit. It turns out to be a full day as researchers introduce the Salmon Project, a strategy which introduces azithromycin to under fives and is shaping to be a game changer in reducing infant and under five mortality. Also commissioned at the Center for Human Virology and Genomics Lab, a sickle cell machine and preparations to test for and prevent HIV/AIDS, all made in Nigeria. The meeting comes to a close as the Minister of State charges NIMA to put more effort into vaccine research, test kit manufacture, and disease surveillance, leveraging on AI to facilitate results and make it easier for government to translate researchers' recommendations into policy. Mary Alala Yusuf, Channels Television News.
Finally, on the program, get your taste buds ready as we head virtually to Argentina. That's where hundreds of chefs from over 14 countries gathered to compete for the title of the best pizza maker at the World Pizza Championship. Participants showcased their skills in kneading, tossing, and spinning the dough while demonstrating their ability to cook quickly and present their crispy dishes to the meticulous eyes of the contest jury. During the most spectacular freestyle category, contestant participants were captured displaying impressive acrobatic tricks and juggling with the dough while creating their pizzas. A first place was secured by a Spanish man who will represent his country at the upcoming, believe it or not, 32nd World Pizza Championship. A man from Cuba secured second place, while the Venezuelan won third place. This year, over 170 competitors from various countries, including Brazil, Colombia, Italy, Panama, Senegal, and Sweden, took part in the championship. All that make me want to have an early dinner. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Obani.